It is Tuesday, and welcome to the Writers' Corner live show. We connect authors to each other and we help readers find new authors to love. You probably already have your favorite type of book, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, but you never know. We may just introduce you to your new favorite genre to love or help you discover some new books that don't fit into any of the traditional genres. You will meet seasoned as well as new and aspiring authors. And some of our seasoned authors will share their tips and tricks of how to get published right the first time. Here on Writers Corner live show, you get to hear the backstories straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So join us live for the insider scoop. Hello, everyone, and hi, Mary. How are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm so excited. We've got two awesome shows today. And so this is number 19, and then we're going to do number 20, and we're super excited. And we get to interview a new author all the way, and Miss Kay is with us today. Thank you, Kay, for joining us.
Kay and
We get to interview.
Eleonora is here.
Yes, hi. And we get to interview somebody all the way from Ireland. So we're like really spread out this morning. Well, morning for me, but it's evening for you and probably Robert too.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And this is quite an exciting thing for us because we suddenly found ourselves. I mean, we started this show not knowing where it would go, whether it would be
Right.
popular or not. And I think I've been blown away by how popular it's become and useful to people in such a short time. And I'm
Absolutely.
having so much fun with the show.
Oh,
Wow.
I know. I know. We are. We're having such a great time. And it's so much fun to meet new people and to hear their backstory and their journeys because people are fascinating, and I mean, I love it. It's very jazzing, it's very energizing, and it's so great to be able to kind of share people with the world. The intention for the show from the very beginning was introducing authors new and seasoned to different social media groups and groups out there who, people who might not see them as quickly. We're trying to kind of help move that along. So, and our author that's on this morning is a brand new one. We're very excited. He's also a Black Rose writing author, and this is his first book. And it sounds so interesting. Bergetti and I, we did a live yesterday talking about his bio and all the, kind of some of the details of the book and the adventure of it. And so I'm excited to hear where all this came from and some of the history part of it and, what inspired him. And so I'm excited for him. And then we need to ask him about his YouTube because I guess he has a YouTube channel. So we need to ask him about that so people can subscribe to that as well.
I know. I'm very excited because there's a couple of questions I've got for him. So shall we bring him on the show?
Absolutely. Let's go for it.
Okay, let's invite him up.
Okay.
And welcome to the show, Robert.
Hi,
Hi.
Robert.
Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
Okay, so what time,
Great
first
to
of all,
finally be on here.
oh, absolutely. So what time is it where you are?
It is now 6 minutes past 3 in the afternoon from chilly
Okay.
Dublin.
Oh, yes, it's cold here too. You can see I'm kind of bundled up,
Yeah.
but it's warmer Brigetti is. So you're only 5 hours ahead of me, and
Yeah,
Brigetti is 7 hours ahead of me.
that's correct. We
So
had our
you,
hour change at the weekend. We did our
oh,
fall
you do
back.
it too. Oh, you do too. We're doing it
Yes.
this weekend coming up is ours. And
Right.
Brigetti and I just had this whole conversation on Sunday. Was it Sunday we had this conversation? He goes, okay, so with your time falling back, does it change your appointments for things? And will it change the show time? Will it interfere? And I said, absolutely not. We just kind of, it's a time change because of the sun setting and rising and, it's darker earlier and all those things. But we basically, our bodies have to adjust more than anything. Because like if you've already made appointments, your appointments are going to stay the same time. Is that the same truth for you guys there?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's tougher going forward from here to the end of the year because in these northern latitudes, it just gets dark so early. So come December, it'll be dark at, from 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then in the morning, it's like 9:30 before it actually starts to get some sunrise. But I think we're coming to an end of it. It's looking like it's going to be gone from maybe next year or the year after, and we're going to stop doing it altogether. And we may stay on summertime. We may stay in summertime all year round.
Why is that?
That will cause its own difficulties, because it might not get right until about 10 o'clock in the morning in the middle of winter. But on the plus side, we'll get a little bit more daylight at the end of the day. So you know what? Everything flips around in summer, because in June it's 11 p.m. here before it gets dark. So that's the opposite side of it, which is really good. So there is a payoff to all of this, which is great. But right now it's a little bit painful.
Oh man, if I came to visit, I would have to definitely visit in the summertime, because the 3 o'clock in the dark, I'm from Florida, so it's sunny all the time and it's green all the time, and you guys are probably deprived of your vitamin D, aren't you?
Well, we are in the winter, that's right. But I know where you're coming from. I lived in Houston for a long time, so 9 years I spent in Houston, which is kind of on the same latitude as Florida, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of know what it's like. It's a little bit more balanced out, and we used to get a lot more sunshine in the winter months. But here in Ireland, we are very deprived of vitamin D in winter, and then come spring, everybody's outside just trying to get some rays to replenish their bodies. So we've got 4 or 5 months of this to go. So.
Oh, wow.
Fingers crossed we'll get through it okay.
Absolutely. Well, why don't I know Brigetti has questions for you about your book. We both do. So do you want to dive right in and tell people the title? And then before we end the show today, we'll definitely let everyone know where they can get it. My great grandparents came from Ireland. I have some from Scotland and Ireland. So I love that area. I've just never been, but I love the history and the culture.
Well, you got to come next year when it's sunny and warm in the summertime.
I'll come pick up Brigetti and we'll swing on over, won't we?
Yay!
Absolutely. So I want to find out, very interesting question. Your book is called Hi Brazil, Island of Eternity. Why is it HY? What is that about?
Well, this, you can actually look it up on Google, because Hi Brazil was a type of mythical island that was said to have existed off the west coast of Ireland. And if you Google it, you'll see that on medieval maps, there was an island listed called Hi Brazil. And it was said to have been there and existed and all the rest. So I kind of got the idea from that. And I said, well, what if this island actually did exist? Maybe I could write a story around that. So I kind of developed it from there, and I got that idea about 2 or 3 years ago, and I kind of sat on it for a while. And then last year, I finally decided to go ahead and write a book about it. And that's how the title came about. It's not my title. I just took the name from something that already existed and then invented a whole fictional story around it, which I hope works out well. I know the title is confusing for some people, but there is a reason for it, and it's because it's like Ireland's Atlantis. You could say Hi Brazil is Ireland's Atlantis, but I think it all comes from Spanish and Portuguese. If you look at Brazil, the country Brazil, it's spelled with an S in the Brazilian language and in Portuguese. So I think that's kind of somewhere where the S came from. But it actually was supposed to have been in the North Atlantic somewhere. So that's how my whole idea of it came around, because I had read some articles about it in newspapers and stuff. And I said, you know what, wouldn't it be fun to write a story with this island that did exist and it did have a population, and maybe try and do something around that. So that's where the whole title came from. And the word eternity is because there's a lot of themes of eternity and living on and continuance and regeneration and rebirth. It just kind of runs all the way through the book. So that's why eternity is in there. And you will see that if you read through the narrative, that it's kind of dotted all the way through, that there's those thoughts and actions going on that kind of set the whole tone for the book. And that's where the Island of Eternity bit came from. So Hy Brasil is from the name that appeared on all these medieval cartographers' maps, and the Island of Eternity is setting the tone for the book itself.
That is so fascinating.
Yeah, I hope everybody gets it. And I think you will. If they read through it, I think they'll notice, even from the get-go, that there's all sorts of themes of birth and death and then rebirth and regeneration. And that's where the whole eternity comes from. And even though it's set in modern times and it's set in the past. So the book itself, while it's about Hy Brasil to a certain extent, it's not all about Hy Brasil, because a lot of it takes place in the present time. And it takes place in Ireland in present day, specifically in Dublin and in Waterford. And even in those sections, eternity is still a very big part of it. And that's why it's kind of open to interpretation from the reader's point of view. They can go back and look. Hopefully they'll go back and be able to see, hey, there was eternity was all mentioned and continuance was all mentioned with Hy Brasil. And that's coming through to present day as well. So it flows all the way through the entire book. And I hope that makes for interesting reading.
Absolutely. What's the symbols? I think Brigitte and I wanted to know what the symbols are on the front.
But there's Celtic, three, right? On the cover of the book, that's an ancient Celtic symbol. Okay. So that's very, very Irish, very Celtic. And you will see that in our Irish monuments, our ancient Neolithic monuments here in Ireland, especially Newgrange is probably the most famous of the Irish ancient burial mounds. And it's about 5,000 years old, but it's surrounded by large boulder stones, and those type of symbols are engraved from 5,000 years ago. So that the symbol on the cover of my book is very, very Irish, very Celtic, and it does symbolize to a certain extent eternity. So all of that plays through into the cover of the book and the title and all the rest of it. So yes, it's a Celtic book, it's an Irish book, and but I think it's universal. People will get something out of it no matter where they live. And in fact, there is a character in my book that hails from Oklahoma, of all places. So, it works for people in Oklahoma as well.
Oh, that's funny. That's very funny.
I was going to ask you a question about that. Are your characters entirely fictional, or are they based on actual people that you know? So you've kind of partly answered that question.
Yes, that's a great question. And I was hoping you actually would ask that question. So that's really good. Thank you for asking that. I do have, there are not many characters in the book. One of them is a gentleman called Olan, I gave him the name. And he is the main protagonist from the section that I wrote about Hy Brasil. And he is kind of a mishmash between me and an uncle of mine. So it's kind of based on him more than me, given that I used him for inspiration. And in fact, the whole house and the home that was used in the book is actually his home. So when we talk about Hy Brasil and the house in Hy Brasil, as well as the house in Waterford in Ireland, that's the house of my relatives down in Waterford, and my uncle specifically. So he's actually dedicated on the inside page of the book, and his name is Reinhardt. So big shout out to Reinhardt. He was in hospital last week, but he's doing much better now. And I gave him a copy of the book last week while he was in hospital, and he absolutely loved it. So he was delighted. But the main character of Olan is based partly on him, and kind of a lot of me in there as well. There's another character which takes place in present time, but he doesn't have a name. It's supposed to be me, the narrator of the story. He doesn't have a name, but it's kind of me, but I tried to keep it somewhat neutral. And this was the whole everything in the book, and I hope that readers will get something out of this, that a lot of the book is left up to interpretation, because the way I tried to write it, and it was hard to pull off, it was about you're not quite fully understanding what's past and what's present, and it's designed to make you think. Am I reading something here from the past, or am I reading something from the present? And that all plays into the eternity and the continuance thing, because ostensibly they're 2,000 years apart, the two narratives, but a lot of everything that goes on is the same. It's almost like the more things change, the more they stay the same, if you know that expression. And that's kind of what goes on in the entire book, and it's almost designed to make the reader wonder what here is true and what's not true, what's going on here. And a lot of it is left to interpretation at the end of the day, because the two houses mentioned in the book, although they're 2,000 years apart, everything about them is exactly the same, and they take place in different ages and different periods, but the whole layout of the house is the same, and the people are kind of the same, and it was difficult to pull off from a writing standpoint, but I hope I've managed to do it. And I'd love to get readers' feedback to see what everybody thinks, because I think they'll all get something different out of it.
Mm-hmm.
People who have read bits of it and even read the whole thing, they get something different out of it each time, the ones that I've actually spoken to. And they're all going, does this happen? Or is this what's going on? Is this what's going on? And I go, well, you're kind of right. You're partly right. But keep reading, and then they go, well, now I have another interpretation of what's going on. So some of it is science fiction-y a little bit, but I don't want to call it a science fiction novel, because it's not. Although there is science fiction elements to it, but there's also real science going on there too. At least I have tried to throw in some real science that might explain some of the things that go on and why certain things happen. So there is a basis for some of this stuff, and it's also a bit literary as well. At least that's what I've attempted in this. So as my cousin said, you might be the first person to come up with the science fiction literary genre. But we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. I think it was hard to write. It was difficult to write, and it involved a lot of editing. But I think at the end of it all, I've managed to pull it off, and I hope everybody gets it.
It's published. So I want to ask you about what genre is it considered?
Well, that's the thing, and I was just saying, it is a difficult one to kind of pigeonhole.
Okay.
Because there are, I would call it literary in the most. It's literature, but there's also this kind of science fiction and a little bit of suspense and adventure even thrown in, and there is a bit of a love interest in there too. So there's a little bit of everything. Everybody might get something out of it. The love interest is a lady from Oklahoma and a gentleman from Dublin. So the female lead from Oklahoma is in Ireland, and she is spending the summer in the National Museum of Ireland, where some of the story takes place. And that's where the adventure part of the novel begins, because they discover things in the National Museum of Ireland, which leads them back to High Brazil. So there's a lot going on. I hope every reader will get something out of it. It's not going to be pigeonholed into one little thing where somebody could say, I don't read science fiction. But if they like literature, they might read it and go, wow, this is not what I thought it would be. It's not science fiction at all. I get more of the literature end out of it, because there's themes running through the book all the way through of this death and rebirth and renewal, and the desire of the human being to live on in some other form or continuance. So I don't want to give too much away. There's a lot going on in this book, but I think everybody will get something good out of it, or something different out of it.
Sure. What age would you? What age? Go ahead, Brigetti.
Well, I'm sorry. Age, definitely adult. Although there's no profanity in it or bad language or anything like that. It's just a straightforward read. anybody could read it if they wanted to read it, but it might be for a younger audience, might find it a difficult read, I would think, because there's a lot going on, and they might not get everything. I think it would certainly be for the more mature reader and somebody who really likes to read. That's what I would guess the book is probably aimed at. It's not your casual reader. I would think it's somebody that likes to read a lot and probably likes varied books and likes to pick up one genre one week and a different genre the next week, and it's just an avid reader. I think that's probably more who it's going to end up being aimed at. Brigitte, did you?
Joshua's got a. I do have a question, but we'll take Joshua's question very quickly first.
Yes.
Joshua says, I have a question. If your main characters were to dress up for Halloween, what would it be?
It's not going to be a leprechaun, put it that.
A leprechaun, yes.
But I would think, let's say, for Halloween, something to do with maybe a druid, possibly a Celtic druid. There's a good one for Halloween. So anybody wants to do something for Halloween in a high Brazil, Island of Eternity theme, go as a druid and you'll fit right in.
So my question is, I mean, this book is sounds very, very intriguing. Have you hidden any sort of secrets in the book intentionally that people would find difficult to identify, that only you would know, or perhaps people that know you very well, only they may pick it up?
Yeah, well, I think some people who know me well might pick some of them up, but there is a kind of conclusion at the end of it all. And again, it comes back to interpretation. I think everybody will find their own interpretation in this novel, and everybody will get their own little way of looking at it. Yes, there are all sorts of secrets and little things, and then there are hints here and there dotted all the way through. But it's almost, I wouldn't say it's a whodunit, but it's kind of, even though it's literature, it's not a whodunit. There's no murder or anything like that. But if you translate a whodunit to a literature setting, that's kind of what it ends up being, because you're wondering all the way through, where's this going? What's happening here? And there's hints to this and hints to that. And then at the end of it all, I hope it all comes together, and then you go, that's what this was all about. But you still might end up having your own interpretation as to whether it was, I don't want to give anything away here, but yes, there are hints dotted all the way through, and I hope that they make you want to read more. In other words, you'll read 30 pages and then you can't wait to read the next 30 pages to see if there's another hint or another clue or some other profound thought going on that makes you want to find out what happens to these people later on in the novel.
And so, who was your biggest inspiration for writing this book, and your biggest support? What was it that drove you to feel compelled to write this book?
That's a great question. Well, about April 2017, I happened to be out of my brother's house, and I was talking to my niece. She's only 16. Her name is Aoife. Hi, Aoife, if you're listening. But I was talking to her, and she said that she'd love to be a writer. And I said, you know what? I said, I've always wanted to, I always thought it'd be a great idea to write a book, love to write a book. But you become one of these people who always say, I'd like to do that, and then you never get around to doing it.
Right.
And you say to yourself, well, why don't they just do it? And so actually that was the one thing that kind of just spurred me into going home, and I started writing down a few ideas, and I went back to my High Brazil idea that I'd written down 2 years earlier. And then I tinkered with it and I worked with it, but I started it. And then it was kind of like a jigsaw. Once you start the jigsaw, you almost, for me anyway, I'm compelled to finish it. I can't just leave another piece there. And you're kind of going back at midnight and sticking another little piece on in another little area, and you find something else to add. And that's how the novel started. It's once you start it, and I think this is a good tip for any writer or any budding writer, anybody who wants to write a book. Start. There's no point in saying I want to do something, and they're never actually making the effort to sit down and write it. That's where you have to begin at the beginning and just go ahead and start doing it. And you know what? Once you start, you will continue. You will keep going, because you'll start getting more and more ideas, and your novel starts playing out. And the more you write, the more you start jotting things down, or something will come to you. Like when I was writing this, things came to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I'd be like, oh, I must remember that for tomorrow. Now, you wouldn't always remember it, but sometimes you'd wake up and the first thing you do would be to write it down so that you'd remember it later on in the day. But that's how you begin to do these things. I'd never done anything like this before. But the hardest thing to do for most people is to start. And I guess that's the way it was for me. But I started it, and many months later, with a lot of revisions, because it was a difficult book to write. I had a draft done in a few months. And guys, the hardest bit is not in the writing of the draft, it's in the editing. Anybody can get the draft out, and I think that's what I'm saying for any aspiring novelist, any aspiring author. Get your draft done. And then after that, you can go back and you can start revising it and working on it and fine-tuning it. And that's where I went with all of this. I wrote the draft, I got it done in a few months, and then I spent forever after that just keep editing and editing. But you know what? Editing is tough and it's painful, but you get some great ideas when you're editing. Stuff that you didn't see before, and you'll go back and you'll read a paragraph that you've written, and then you go, I can write that in a much better way now from reading it the second time around, or even the third or the fourth time around. And then suddenly, as I said, things will come to you in the middle of the night. And then you go, that's how I write that paragraph. And that's how you do it. But at the end of it all, it's also worth it, because then you'll have a much more polished manuscript for having put in the effort of having done it. And then you're ready to present it to the world. And that's pretty much what happened to me. I mean, the beginning is the beginning, and then after that, you have to get it published. But start and do all the stuff you have to do, and then take it from there.
Right. And you know what, Robert?
We're out of time, I'm afraid.
I know. It went so fast, and we still have questions for you. So we need to bring you back on. Yes, we need to bring you back on, like closer to the release date. So let everybody know real quick the release date and where they can pre-order the book, and then where it will be actually after it's released for sale.
Right. Well, right now it's up on the website of the publisher, which is Black Rose Writing, and you catch it there under the literature section. And there's a 15% off discount for anybody that uses the code pre-order 2018, all one word. It's also available now for pre-order on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, which is great. And the release date is January 3rd. But again, it is available for pre-order right now. So that's all great. And I've got a couple of months now to keep going and trying to get a few pre-orders in. But I would love to come back on the show and talk some more. I could talk to you guys, I think, for another 2 hours. And I probably wouldn't. You'd be looking to get rid of me. You'd be like, we don't want you back on the show. Go away.
No, we enjoyed this, didn't we, Brigetti?
It's been great visiting.
We did.
Yes,
we did. We'll definitely have to have you back. So I think I want to just say thank you to everyone for joining us today, everyone who watched the show on live and on the replay. And we'll definitely invite you back again. So we'll have to say goodbye for now. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.